Welcome back. So President Trump told Fox Business this week he still wants to tackle health care before tax reform.
A lot of people asking, though, is that really feasible with Congress still in such gridlock?
Yeah, Slade Gorton represented Washington for 2 decades in the U.S. Senate. He is here with us this morning to help us sort of sort out how we actually got here. You were there in a day when it was civil and things got done. Did you see change over your 20 years in the Senate?
There was some, but it was postponed. 2 things have happened, it seems to me. The first is, when I was in the Senate, there were at least half a dozen Republicans who were more liberal than the most conservative Democrats, and half a dozen Democrats who were more conservative than the most liberal Republicans. That's almost totally gone now due to elections. And the second thing is, in the last few years that I was there, and for a very short time thereafter, the Republican leader, Senator Lott, and the Democratic leader, Senator Daschle, actually were good friends with one another. They could be opponents politically, but they weren't enemies. That's not really quite the case now.
Why is that, do you think? You left the Senate in 2001. What have you seen in the years since as far as why things might be changing the way they have been?
Polarization among the American people. You know, the bitterness of the last presidential campaign and the like. There are fewer people in politics, and unfortunately probably fewer people outside of politics, who want to just talk about politics. They want to argue about it and demonize their opponents.
It feels like politics is at its base personal. That's true. But arguing politics or debating politics or legislating, maybe it's not so good that that's personal. It's become so personal.
Yes, that's a good comment.
One of the recent sort of things I think that has happened that has people saying, is this getting worse, is the Senate decision to get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court justices. We read that you were advising the Senate Majority Leader that was something he should probably do. I'm curious about why you think that's a good thing.
And I think he should go further.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Than he has. The filibuster historically was used at the end of long debates on very serious questions. But beginning, when I was there, it was extended to more and more things, to the confirmation of assistant secretaries of state and the like, and even to the proposition that you would bring an issue up. Republicans did it when they were in a majority, Democrats did it when they were in a majority. But the big change was Senator Reid, Democratic leader, about 6 or 8 years ago, changed the rules so that the filibuster rule itself could be removed by a simple majority vote. And he removed it to all appointments by the president except for the United States Supreme Court. Well, you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. When the Democrats decided to filibuster Judge Gorsuch, Senator McConnell said, fine, we'll change it. It'll only take 51 votes, a simple majority of the Senate, to end that debate and to confirm Judge Gorsuch. I think it was a terrible mistake on the part of the Democrats to take that issue on when the candidate himself was so highly qualified. They would have done a lot better to have saved it for a different day. But it'll come up again because health care that you talked about at the beginning of this segment, tax reform, none of those issues can be brought up now without getting a bipartisan majority in the Senate. And that bipartisan majority doesn't seem to be there.
What do you think the state is? This is an overly broad question, and I apologize, but if anyone can begin to answer it, it's you. What do you think is the state of each of the political parties, where we stand right now? You mentioned the Democrats and deciding to go for it and debate Neil Gorsuch for, over maybe valuing a different debate. And a lot of Democrats came out and said, this is our way of showing our constituents that we're ready to fight for some of their beliefs. But both parties have seemed fractured off and on over the last couple of years, especially with the recent presidential election. What's next for the parties?
The parties didn't reflect the people of the United States very well last year. For the first time in my long life, I voted for neither of the major party candidates for president, because the party organizations tend to move to the extreme. The Republicans to the right, the Democrats to the left. Most of the people of the United States are somewhere in the middle. and their views aren't reflected very well by the way the two political parties are run.
So how do we get back to a representative democracy?
The question is tougher than that. We have representative democracy now. This split reflects the way most of the people of the United States think. Most of the congressional districts in the United States are one-party districts, not due to gerrymandering, but due to the way that the people live and where they move. In one sense, Congress reflects the American people only too well.
So it's our own fault.
In a sense, in a sense, it is. And until we start listening to one another, it's hard to it's hard to hope that members of Congress are going to do so.
How realistic is it that members of Congress will change and that voters will change? Or are we looking at a future where we will eventually see multiple parties in a very real way? Independent parties, green parties, those have had a harder time gaining a lot of traction in presidential elections. Do you see that changing?
Well, they have a hard time getting traction in congressional elections as well.
True.
There are only 2 or 3 nominally non-Republican and non-Democratic members of either House or Congress. And in fact, even those who call themselves independents are really members of one party or the other. Members of Congress are as worried about this as people are. And many of them are attempting to come up with a way to reach across the aisle. And maybe the best example of that maybe Senator John McCain from Arizona, who was everything as a fierce partisan, when he began in Congress, ran for president of the United States. Today is very independent in his views and has a number of followers in the United States Senate, at least. I think we need to hope for a little bit more of that in both houses of Congress.
Senator Slade Gorton, it is always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for helping us sort of wrap our minds around it. And as always,
Yes.
it's take a little bit of the ownership of the problem for ourselves
Yes.
before we're pointing too many fingers elsewhere, it sounds like to me. So thank you very much for being here this morning.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thank you.